You're tuned into The Collective Voice, thought-provoking interviews co-hosted by young adults, fostering deep faith through courageous questions. Welcome to the conversation. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of The Collective Voice. I'm Reverend Phil Dieke, the Director of Congregational Innovation at Austin Seminary, and today I'm joined by Rachel Becker. Rachel is somebody that I met through the Wild Church Network, which is just something I do for fun on my inside time, It's something I got connected with when I read Church of the Wild by Victoria Lours and became really fascinated about the way people are connecting for spiritual connection and spiritual formation and flourishing outside of the walls of churches, typically out in Mother Nature and out in the wild. And that's why it's called Church of the Wild. And so did a leadership thing with them for a few weeks this fall and got connected with Rachel through that. It turns out you were one of, I think, 2 young adults that were a part of this whole leadership network. And so I reached out to both the young adults and I was like, hey, you're here. And that's saying something to me because there's a lot of older people here, sadly myself included now, but you are a young adult and I love that you're in this space and want to know more about that. And so thanks for joining us and being a part of the Collective Voice in this conversation. I would love for you to just share a little bit about yourself and kind of give your own bio as to what got you to where you are today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I'm Rachel. I am a death doula and an artist and have actually a little bit of a background in interfaith ministry. I got involved with the Wild Church Network because about 10 years ago, as an art project, I started something called Church of Earth. And that was kind of a way of me imagining if I could start my own church totally from scratch, what would it look like? And for me, it really came down to just having a healthier relationship with the earth and kind of as a way to empower myself in my own path of spirituality, which has been it was very formless for a while. So that's how I came into the network. And for me, I think my art practice tends to focus a lot on my relationship with the earth and kind of our collective situation. And my spiritual path and creative paths feel very interwoven.
Are you comfortable sharing where people can find your art stuff?
Totally. I have a website. It's rachelzbecker.com.
It sounds fascinating, and I might have been peeking through your website yesterday, and there's some cool stuff on there. So, so you said your art practice and your spiritual practice blend, right? Like kind of integrate, merge. Can you share a little bit more about like what that looks like?
Yeah. So one of the things I was doing for a while and still do, as kind of interwoven with this Church of Earth project, was creating altars. I always was fascinated by altars. Part of that is because I didn't really grow up within a religious context. Like by heritage, I'm Christian, but my parents didn't take us to church. And so when I did go into churches, I always just felt this sense of awe and like stillness and kind of this this profound stillness that I hadn't really experienced anywhere else. And, seeing my parents, who were both raised Catholic and both devoted to Catholicism, for a lot of their life, and then having kind of left the church and feeling sort of traumatized by their experience, I was then really fascinated because I didn't have that trauma, so I was kind of seeing it with fresh eyes and was like, what is this? What are all these religious, I don't know, what's the word? Not traditions, but just like the rituals and what makes something sacred. I think I got really fascinated with that. And so I started experimenting with creating altars as basically a space for trying to invite the sacred. And that felt like a very creative practice for me because it's like bringing together color and shapes and like material. So it's almost like a sculpture in a way, but then it has the ability to be like literally experience. I have a direct experience with spirit in a way. So I still do that. It's just kind of a way of centering my intention, but also if I'm out on a walk or something, I'll sometimes find different objects, like maybe like a little piece of trash and then some leaves and branches and rocks, and try to make it into like a beautiful arrangement and kind of leave it as an offering. So yeah, that's, I think, the best example of where the creative and spiritual meet.
That's really beautiful. And what a gift for other people as they're walking along and see this like blending of trash and, random things put together. Yeah, that's cool. You said, what makes something sacred? What? That's a big question.
Yeah.
Where have you landed on that? What do you think does make something sacred for you?
Yeah. So I think it has something to do with attention, attention and intention. Because theoretically, anything could be perceived as sacred in my mind, like, because it's part of the universe. And I think that, this universe and this earth is inherently like has this mystery to it that, and this unknown that I guess feels sacred to me because of the fact that it's mysterious, maybe. But also, I think I just perceive a lot of beauty and wonder in the world. And so that's part of it too. But yeah, I think it's like there's something about choosing to interact with something with intention and with attention that can allow myself to perceive it as sacred, I guess, or like invite that experience in. So I could be like walking along on a hike and there's like this beautiful river going by, but if I'm not paying attention to it, it's not really going to be sacred to me. But if I'm like, oh wow, if I can really look at it and be with it, I'm like, what is this substance? Like, water is such a crazy, like, what is this? And just kind of sit there and wonder about it and allow it to teach me something or show me something, or yeah, that's my answer right now.
Right now might change tomorrow, but I think it's a pretty solid answer right now. Perceive a lot of beauty and wonder in the world. I think that's fantastic, and that's what has drawn me back out into nature. I grew up in like rural small town Missouri, where on like 80 acres and lots of trees and a little creek that ran through our back property too. And so the more I get back out into nature, the more I'm like getting back in touch with my childhood self, I feel like, and it's rekindling this sense of wonder in me too. And so I love that idea of beauty and wonder. I'm also just really fascinated by this idea of figuring out what the sacred is. I think so often we think of, well, you learn that in church, or you learn that in, if it's not church, then, whatever your faith community might be. And so having not grown up in a like active faith community like that, I think there's a lot of meaning making that you're developing, and like maybe not on your own, right? Like you're finding different communities probably. Like where have you found the opportunity to explore that and make meaning, and like maybe just try on these different things of like what is sacred in community beyond yourself?
Yeah, it's been a very meandering path, but I feel like it even started when I was a little kid, and my friend and I would kind of make these almost little offerings for fairies, to invite fairies to come and play. Like we'd create little, basically play areas for them and write them letters. And that was kind of, I guess, this first experience of mysticism and like what are other spirits, or other types of realities that are available. And then I think as I got older, like into college and high school and college, got really fascinated with outer space and kind of more like the science element, I guess. Like what is this stuff that's out there? There's this whole big universe, and that was like very fascinating and beautiful. And then I think I was always attracted to Buddhism. And I ended up, when I was 22, living at a Buddhist retreat center in northern Colorado for a year and a half. And that was very formative for me, learning how to meditate and having access to all these different retreats around Taoism, yoga, mostly Eastern philosophy. And that was also kind of where I was fascinated with, like, we'd have these shrine rooms, which is where meditation retreats would happen. And again, I was staring at these altars, like, what is it about these altars that is making this room feel sacred or still or reverent, and like why are these specific items chosen and all of that. And I think through that I also became involved with a Sufi lineage for a short time. That's where I did this interfaith ministry training, where we were learning each month about a different religion, and then also learning about how to facilitate a funeral or a wedding, these kind of things, just how to be spiritual support in one's community. And I guess from there, we also had a lot of units on death and dying, suicide, funerals. And by the time that program was done, I realized I didn't want to be ordained as an interfaith minister, but I did want to continue exploring how to support people through death. And that's what eventually led me to become a death doula. And interwoven along the way was like this Church of Earth project, and just me knowing that like my spirituality is very much connected with, being in the wild, and like kind of looking to just this feeling of being held by the earth and being reminded of wonder and beauty by the earth, and that in itself being its own healing. And kind of also connected with at that time, I was very much involved in kind of environmental activist space. I felt a lot of rage about the way things were being done, and just kind of this like deep grief and rage at our disconnection from the earth, and like all the implications of that, and our disconnections from our own bodies. And yeah, that just led me into this very much activist space, but that in itself is like a whole other story.
Well, I'm curious about that, just because would you say that activism was birthed out of this deep spiritual connection?
I think
was it just rage? It could be both.
I think it's both. I mean, I think it's like first there's the love, because I knew that I loved this thing, and then there's the rage at seeing the way it's being disrespected, and the way that people and our bodies are being disrespected, and the way I was disrespecting my own body. And yeah, there's just a deep, deep rage, and that rage is actually what initially inspired me to start Church of Earth, because I felt like I needed to do something creative I just had this creative motivation. So I look back at that experience of rage as actually being very powerful. And, while it was making my shoulders and neck extremely tense and, really hard physically, it just gave me this motivation to really create something that mattered to me. But then eventually led to deep burnout and the abandonment of the project. So, but again, meeting you in the Wild Church Network, that was kind of me feeling like I actually want to come back to this and figure out a way to create spaces for people to connect with the earth in a spiritual way. That feels really important to me. So, yeah.
So burnout, like this makes me think of things that kind of end up separating us from either like a religious setting or a spiritual setting. Or so you talked a little bit about kind of growing up almost like what I think you said culturally, Christian, maybe like in a space where your parents had grown up Catholic, but there was trauma around that. And I know trauma and burnout aren't necessarily the same thing, but in some ways that's what often disassociates us or disconnects us from a religion or a faith-based community. So would you be willing to share just some about like what that was like growing up with that as kind of like a background, and what maybe led you away from a more organized religious understanding, but then like you found yourself creating you literally called it Church of the Earth, right? Like what would lead you to call it church,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, one of my first thoughts is going to church on Christmas Eve with my parents and grandparents, and singing one of the hymns, and then noticing my mom kind of only singing the parts that she agreed with.
I didn't know to do that too.
Because she loves singing, but I think part of my parents' reason for leaving the Catholic Church was just, the way that women were kind of spoken about and treated, and not allowed to hold positions of leadership. And that just didn't sit well with my parents. Even though, I was born in Kenya because my parents were with a Catholic mission, living in Tanzania at the time. And so like my life, it comes directly out of that, and then both sets of my grandparents were very connected with their churches. And for them, it always just felt like very service oriented, and very much just like we're following the path of Jesus and the way Jesus lived his life, which was helping people, and so that was always instilled in me as a kid, just, I guess, even just by their example, seeing like all my family members very service and community oriented. But then, so that was just like being absorbed through osmosis, but then we weren't actually going to church. My mom actually did start a Unitarian Universalist chapter. So we went to that. I don't remember getting much religious information from those times. I just remember, making little crafts like God's eyes with popsicle sticks and that kind of thing. And we did a production of The Christmas Story. But yeah, so again, it was just I felt like I was kind of free to just figure out whatever I was interested in. My parents weren't going to give me any kind of religious or spiritual direction. And in fact, they would, kind of tense up whenever that was a possibility. Like they didn't want to have anything to do with it. Yeah. So.
Which again kind of makes it remarkable that you've found yourself where you are now,
Mm-hmm.
Like what do you think kept you tethered to this kind of connection as opposed to just fleeing from it like your parents did?
I think curiosity, because I was just like, why does this thing hold so much, tension and power? What's going on here? And also like kind of not really understanding, because I always did see Jesus as this like really fascinating figure who, lived by example in all these ways that I completely agree with. But then I think it's more just like the power structure of the church itself, which is where it became an issue for my parents. And I think just started feeling constricting and limiting of the experience of God. Where it's like, for example, being out in the forest, it's like I feel that I'm experiencing God and I'm experiencing the beauty of the universe and like what God created. And then I think in some circles being told like, no, that's not God. God can only be found in the four walls of the church or whatever. Yeah. So I think for me, I was just kind of drawn to like exploring that mystery, like and then seeing, experiencing my time living at the Buddhist Retreat Center and then exploring other religions. It's like, oh, I think all of these religions are actually talking about the same thing, like the same source, like the same God. And if God is really so, expansive and powerful, why would it be limited to one tradition? It makes sense that different cultures around the world would, we all humans would have this experience of like, wait, what are we doing here? What is this thing? What is this mystery? And kind of be in awe in that. And then through different cultural situations, create different ways of describing it. So, and I think, yeah, to me, I think that's really fascinating. And it's really cool to see different ways that cultures and religions describe that. And I don't think it invalidates any of them. It actually, to me, it makes it stronger, because it can be experienced in a multiplicity of ways.
Yeah. So back to the question of why you named it Church of the Earth, right? Is that right? Church of the Earth?
Church of Earth, yeah.
Church of Earth, yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, was there a lot of thought that went into that title around the idea of the usage of the word church specifically?
Honestly, the words just kind of fell into my head is how it felt. The way it happened was that a friend of mine had an art show in this space in Fort Collins, Colorado, which was like a free community art space where anyone could just rent the space for free to use for 2 weeks at a time to do basically whatever they wanted. And I was like, whoa, that's a really cool opportunity. What would I do? I would want to create a church and imagine, I would want to create my own religious or sacred space. Because I was living at the Buddhist retreat center at the time. And I was like, I really like Buddhism, but I don't know if I want to call myself a Buddhist. I don't know if I want to call myself a Christian. I don't know if I want to choose one thing. So let me just experiment with what would be true for me. And so I think I was just brainstorming and those words just kind of came to me. But then I also felt like there was some kind of irony to it that I was playing with a little bit, kind of making fun of myself. Like, am I really starting a church? And also phonetically it sounded good. Church of Earth, they kind of rhyme. I don't know. And I kind of was I played a little bit with some Christian imagery and, was kind of trying to play with this idea of what actually is a church in a little bit of what I thought was a playful way. Maybe some people would see it a different way, but yeah.
What has this been like for like the community and people that you kind of like live life with on a day-to-day basis? Like, are there people that meet you in this space, or are they like, again, I feel like it's a tough question somewhat because of the way that Christianity is viewed now, and so even associating yourself with something that's called church could be, again, viewed very hostile from people within the church or from people beyond the church for a variety of reasons. Do you feel like you're surrounded by people that are kind of more hostile toward that, or just more of open to the space that you would be interested in creating?
At the time, I think I didn't really encounter that much hostility. I did have a few people have reactions to the word church where they were like, I don't really want to go to that. I don't want to go to anything that sounds like church. But I mean, the people that did come, I think were just more curious and thought it sounded funny, but actually also, because so what I did is I initially had that art show, and then from there I kind of opened it up and we did a community art show. So there was more people than just me making the art, and it was all kind of a celebration for Earth Day. And then I was also doing different workshops and started holding these community meetings where we would meet in the park and create an altar together and just kind of have a space to share what was coming up for people around, kind of the emotional implications of climate change and the climate crisis and all of that. So it became more of a sharing space, and it didn't feel very churchy. But I think part of what I was interested in too is the fact that I think humans really need ritual. I know that I was really craving ritual, and I was craving those spaces to connect with the sacred in a meaningful way and connect with other people. And that, I think, has been the trickiest part, because I feel like it's something that we inherently need, but there's this rejection or reaction to, I don't want to be part of that because it feels like church.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how can we, because there has been so much pain in the way people have been hurt by different aspects of Christianity, or the power structures of the church, more so than the messages of Jesus itself. So I am really interested in how can we heal our relationship with spirituality and religion and ritual.
Yeah, I love that you just said heal, because that's what it was making me think of. Like, what does healing look like for people in the midst of this? Maybe that's a question for you personally, or just kind of what you're seeing in community around you. But what does healing look like?
Healing, I mean, I think the first thing I think of is wholeness. And for me, that's involved kind of a different way of orienting to my relationship with myself in the sense that I'm accepting all of the parts of myself, even the ones that I don't like or that I have a harder time with. I think for me, a lot of that has come from, I guess, racial justice work. There's a teacher, Lama Rod Owens, who's a Buddhist teacher, and he, I think, first introduced this idea in a retreat I did with him around, he said something like, I don't want to be good. I'm done trying to be good. And how this kind of orientation around goodness and badness is causing us to suppress a lot of things and not being willing to actually see like the fullness of what's going on. And so that's been extremely helpful for me, because I've definitely been very socialized throughout my life and learned, you want to be good. You have to orient towards being good. And I think it was making me deny the difficult aspects of my personality, or like the ways that I might be hurting people. I wasn't willing to accept that because I was so oriented towards being good, and so for me, healing has been being able to recognize all the, the painful parts about being human, like kind of accepting and allowing the grief to be part of my experience, the anger, the frustration, the insecurity, So rather than rejecting those feelings or experiences when they come up, I think it's just a deep practice of, okay, this is what's happening. It's accepting the reality of what is actually happening rather than trying to deny or suppress it. And then it's kind of like, oh, you can see that all of those things have a place. All of those things are important. And, I'm imagining like the yin yang symbol in my mind, where it's like, you need the darkness and the light. We need night and day. And this like proclivity to suppress the dark things or the difficult things and try to control or make them go away, it actually just causes them to go deeper. They're not actually going away because, the reality of the situation is that they exist. And we can't make them not exist. So for me, it's just like accepting and allowing like all of these things to be there, and be present with them.
Yeah. The whole idea of like good and bad, right? Sometimes I feel like that with the yin yang, like there's this like, oh, it's back to binaries again, but it's just another way of perceiving though, right? And sometimes it's more helpful for me to think of seasons, like we're in fall, and guess what? Winter's around the corner, and a winter is a time of the seasons where everything goes into hiding, and it is darker way longer, and our propensity to always just have lights on because we can, and we don't sit with the darkness, and we don't allow ourselves to hibernate, because production, we got to produce things all the time, so the seasons have been really helpful for me in that same way of just recognizing that there's a place for all of it, like you said, and that is I think a healing recognition. It's not always easy. It's not an easy pathway, but I do think you're right. I think that is a part of the healing. Oh, yeah. That's really good.
Well, that also makes me think of death too, because honestly, the training I did to be a death doula was one of the most healing things I've ever done.
Really?
And I think...
Okay, can you define death doula, just so that if somebody's listening, they're like, wait, what in the world is a death doula?
Yeah, totally.
And not define, will you just describe it?
Yeah, so essentially, death doula is someone who provides non-medical holistic support to someone that's dying or the people that are caring for them. And death doulas also do a lot of kind of community outreach and education work, just to kind of, get the conversations going around death and dying, which is often a taboo topic and something people don't really want to bring up. So yeah, there's a lot of education involved in it. It's kind of like a midwife, but for death, essentially. So death doulas will also kind of be present during an actual death, while someone's actively dying, and just be there to be present and support in whatever way is needed. Kind of help counsel people through their fears and anxieties around dying, and help people plan for funerals. There's a whole range of things that death doulas can do. So.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So you said the training was really healing for you.
Yeah, I think because, a lot of what we did in the very beginning was having to kind of face our own death and face our own fears around death. So, we did practices like a guided death meditation where we were invited to kind of imagine our body's systems shutting down and letting go of our body and kind of watching it disintegrate and return to the elements. And that was a very calming experience, actually. I thought it might be a little bit scary, but it actually was kind of a relief to be able to imagine letting go at that level, and then seeing how I was just returning to, my body would just return to the elements and be able to be remade into something else, and, who knows what happens spiritually, but at least I know that, like, physically that's what's going to happen. And yeah, so again, I think part of the healing is recognizing that death is natural. Everyone dies. We all, like, everything dies. And so for me, that gives me peace knowing that I'm part of something bigger. I belong to something. When I die, I will just join like millions and billions of other beings that have died. And for me, that gives me a lot of peace. And then I think also helps me recognize, like, life. One of the big things I've learned from death work is just that there's a requirement of, like, letting go of control, having to surrender. And I think surrender was, I wrestled with surrender for at least a decade before I was able to actually experience it. And just that there's a lot of healing in being able to let go and be held by something. And my thoughts are very rambly right now, so I can, like, keep going on.
Well, I think surrender is a tough one, right? Like, that's a hard, and obviously giving up control is a not easy thing for a whole lot of people. Did you find specific rituals in the midst of this that really helped you come to that space?
I don't know if I found specific rituals, but I will say that even to bring it back to Christianity, something that has really helped me is seeing my grandmother's example, just like the way she lives her life. She's very devoted to her faith and her relationship with Jesus. And she is actually dying right now, and I've been able to be there and care for her. But really, like, learn from her. That's mostly what I've been doing. And she just has so much trust and faith in her relationship with God and life, that she's just, like, completely surrendered to this process and has, like, no worry, no anxiety, no fear, really. She's just, and I think she's always kind of been that way. And for me, as someone who tends to be more neurotic and anxious and overthinking, being with her is extremely grounding, because she just doesn't worry. She's just completely trusts that she's going to be taken care of one way or another, by God, by life. And so just being around her and seeing that that's an option of the way to live has influenced me. And yeah, and then I think facing my own death also, I noticed a significant change in my relationship to anxiety when I was able to actually face my own death, and accept the fact that I might die before I'm ready. I had a lot of anxious, I remember during the training, I woke up in the middle of the night, like, with an anxiety attack, because I was like, what if I'm going to die before I've done X, Y, and Z, But then again, I don't have control over that. So it's just kind of that reminder of what do I actually have control of over? And that's, the way I'm living my life today. But there's a lot of things I don't have control over. And so I think that just being able to surrender and like be held by something, whether it's God or the earth or, however a person sees it, I think that is extremely helpful in just being a human.
Take a deep breath after that one. Because what a gift to be able to accompany your grandmother through this in something that has meant so much to you. And also, I love that you said, like, really what you're doing is just learning. That's really sweet. So thanks for sharing that. That's a really like intimate moment. So I appreciate you sharing that. I don't know where to go with that. It's really just beautiful. Well, I guess what would you want people to hear? Like, or if you said a lot about education, right? A lot of death doula is education. And obviously the control piece is a big one, right? Control and surrender are big pieces of education for people. But what would you, like, if you could, especially young adults, right? Like, this podcast is really geared toward young adults. It's also geared toward like people in the church who are wanting to learn about young adults. So I'm hoping they're learning a whole lot right now, because I am too. But what would you really want people to learn about death from what your experience has been in your training?
I think the biggest thing, at least like the teacher, the founder and teacher of my training, Elua Arthur, the training is called Going with Grace. If anyone's interested, highly recommend it. Whether or not you want to be a death doula, it's just a great thing to do to understand kind of death and dying processes more. And it's very rich training. But the thing that she always says is death work is really about life work. The way someone dies is, in a lot of ways, can be a reflection of the way they lived, or the way that they face their death at the end of their life is a reflection of the way they lived. And that, facing your own death is really about, looking at the way that I'm living. So if I was to die tomorrow, could I be at peace with that based on the way I've lived my life? Am I living within my values? Am I living in a way that makes me really feel alive? And am I able to really be present in my life and appreciate what's here? Because everything is temporary. It's all temporary. And so I think there's a lot of richness in being able to recognize that just like on a daily basis, And I think there's, just a lot of gratitude when you can recognize that, this part of what makes this beautiful, in my opinion, is the fact that it's temporary. Death makes life potent. Life and death need each other. Life can't exist without death. Death makes life possible also. We eat every day, we're eating things that have died in order to sustain our life. And when we die, our bodies have the potential to continue to sustain life. And so that understanding, I think, is like very deep. And then I think also part of that is just, being willing to talk about it. The biggest thing that comes up, I think, when someone's dying is, there's a lot of family disputes. If someone hasn't been clear about what they want, how they want to be treated when they're dying, what their wishes might be, what assets they want to go to which people, there can be a lot of strife within family, a lot of confusion. And so I think the more that we can just talk about it and acknowledge that this is a reality, the easier it will be to face and to accept when death does arrive, because it's inevitable. That's the other thing. It's like just facing and accepting the inevitable is like a daily practice. I could talk about this for hours. So
yeah. Well, let me give you my like kind of left field. So I just read, I think it's Ray Kurzweil is the author, and it's called "The Singularity is Nearer." and it's a follow-up to a book he wrote about 15 or 20 years ago about like the singularity is near. But he talks like he's a futurist, and right, and he talks a lot about like AI and what's happening with AI. And then he got on this whole conversation of like nanobots, and like this may be like just so out in left field. So you may be like, I don't know, I don't want to talk about this. He said in the book, he was like, there are people alive today who will have the option to live forever because of what's happening with nanobots and like the ability to heal our bodies in a way that will, and or right, like kind of like transhumanism, an idea of like uploading consciousness into the cloud kind of thing. So between those two things, between nanobots and between transhumanist understanding of uploading your consciousness, what does that do for us as human beings who, one, are so terrified of death that clearly we're like striving to figure out how to live forever? And then what does that do with this idea of like part of what makes life valuable is death, right? I remember like my dad passed in '08, and I remember when my Old Testament professor in seminary talked about the book of Ecclesiastes, like you just did about life and death, right? That everything is temporary. And so often it's like translated as like vanity or meaninglessness, but the term in Hebrew is havel, which means vapor. Like everything is vapor. It's just temporary, you know? And so reading Ecclesiastes really helped me come to grips with like the grief of dealing with the loss of my father. And because I think the whole purpose of Ecclesiastes, that book, is that the meaning in life really does come from death, you know? Like there's at one point, it's just, God has put before us like the toils of our work to do, but you know, also God has said to like just basically eat, drink, and be happy because that's what this life is about. You know, like, that's really bad paraphrasing my summary here, but so I don't know what to do with that though, right? Like when now we're playing with technologies that are trying to say like, no, we're actually going to overcome this thing of death.
Yeah,
that's a big one, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't want that. I want that for myself. I mean, I guess if someone wants to try that, it's an interesting experiment, but I'm also wondering like what is forever? Like forever is a long time. I mean, I think it really comes down to someone's worldview too. And like what their values are, and surely there's so much to be experienced in life. And if you could live forever, you know, you could experience so many things. But I still just don't know if that's even like at a certain point the sun's going to explode and absorb the earth. So there's not really a forever.
That's right.
You know?
Yeah.
So, and I think that is also something that it just gives me peace personally to know that, you know, everything ends. Like we're never stuck in one situation, even if things feel really hard. You always know like eventually a new season is going to come, you know, eventually, even if it feels like we're so stuck in one thing, eventually something does change and does shift. And so personally for me, that gives me peace. And I don't know I don't want to be a cyborg living forever.
You don't want your consciousness uploaded into the cloud?
I don't think so. Yeah.
Maybe don't read the book. It's a little rough. It's a very much like messes with the mind.
I mean, it's very fascinating.
It is fascinating, which is really what led me to it, because I'm intrigued by it. And there's more of an anthropological study for me in the midst of it. Again, what is the worldview? Like, what makes you want to live forever? And again, maybe forever is a strong term, but you know, what makes you want to continue on and on and on? And I don't know. Like, I don't know that I have that desire, you know? And so what would cause somebody to really want to desire that? And like you said, there's a lot to experience in the world. And obviously in less than 100 years or around 100 years, you can only experience so much. But you're right. The finitude of it is what I think creates value in the moment of it.
And I think also like for me, the appreciation of the fact that I can only do so much. I mean, I think, you know, one person can do a lot. I mean, we can do more together as a community, but even then, like, you know, there's a limit to what any of us are able to accomplish just because of our physical bodies limit us.
Yeah.
And so in that understanding, there's the ability to surrender to something bigger. And try to, like in Taoism, I think the idea would be to move with that move with the energy of like the collective, rather the energy of the mystery, rather than trying to control it and like dominate it.
Which also just feels so countercultural to where we currently live.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack regarding like our political situation and social situation. Because there is a sense of urgency of so much needs to be done, you know? But like, how can we do what needs to be done and also have a little bit of spiritually, or like a little bit of a detachment spiritually, where it's like, I'm going to do what needs to be done, but I'm not going to let this destroy me, or I'm not going to let myself become afraid or hateful. I'm going to stay centered in love. Like, I think that's just like where I'm at right now, is how can I stay grounded in love and surrendering to like this bigger picture rather than, I think that, certain systems or people want to create environments of fear. And I just have a lot of resistance to getting sucked into that, because that just feels very unproductive.
That's a good way to put it. Very unproductive, yeah. And like almost like a submitting to that, right? Like that's the wrong form of submission, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When there's like so much love and wonder and beauty, like to me, that's the truth.
Ugh.
The fear space and like the scarcity space and the greed, like that doesn't feel like, that feels like a distortion. And so, yeah, again, I think of my grandma, who's just, she's just trusting, can obviously like the fear and grief around it needs to be included again, because that's part of the experience. But I just always have to come back to like, I come back to the earth and like the grounding of the earth, because that's where I perceive beauty and wonder. And to me, that's just always, even if I'm mixed up, totally anxious, reading the news, things are horrible, I look outside and I'm like, wow, look how beautiful the sky is. There's birds flying around, like all this stuff is still happening. There's still the stars. There's, all that is still there. And so that just keeps me grounded, basically.
This is my like home office, and there's a tree right outside my window, and I often have hummingbirds there, and that's what keeps me grounded. Like often there's hummingbirds, and they're like mysterious in their own nature, like in how they float around. And yeah, I have to do that often, and just walk outside and put my feet on the grass and just be like, okay, take a deep breath here. We're okay. We're okay for this moment, Yeah. This has been beautiful. I don't even know. Like, I had a question like bouncing around in my head of like, what is it that you would want to share with other young adults in this space of like curiosity, of like spiritual curiosity, or even like what would you want to, like, if you could tell the church anything, and based on like your own spiritual experiences and explorations. But I don't know if either one of those questions resonate well. So if they don't, then that's okay. But if you do have something that's kind of stirring in the midst of that, I would love to hear it.
Yeah, I think I definitely love the idea of following your curiosity. And if we can kind of take a step back from our original assumptions about something and just try to see it without as much conditioning, be like, what actually is that thing? I think that's kind of where wonder can come in. And I think that is just such a healing balm to be able to experience wonder. And it's a pretty weird world if you really look at it. It's like, what the heck is this place? And I think just staying in that curiosity, I think can be really supportive. And being able to kind of, I think that allows for a little bit more playfulness. And when, especially when things feel so serious, the more playfulness and the more laughter. I mean, I think laughter is literally the best medicine. And being able to laugh at the absurdity of things, even as they're like crumbling and feel horrible. Laughter, I think, is what will get us through. And I also do think that, relationships I've been playing around with this idea that, what if relationships were a retirement plan, instead of, because I'm like, do I need to plan for retirement? Da, da, da. But, relationships is, if we have strong relationships with each other on like a local basis, whether it's through the church. I mean, I think the church is probably one of the best places, or, there's so many, I feel like so much community comes out of church. And so if that can be just like a really strong place for people to feel connected to each other and be able to meet each other and have hard conversations and kind of just build it's like an opportunity to build a stronger community. I think that's awesome and super needed. So
relationship as retirement.
Yeah.
That's maybe there's your book. I don't know. Maybe you just wrote a title for your book. I don't know if you're looking to write a book or not, but that sounds like something.
I would like to one day.
Yeah. And I think it all wraps in with the idea of death doula too. That's, anyway, we could go down a whole path on that one. This has been so wonderful, so lovely. You mentioned your website, right? RachelZBecker.com. Is that right? I'll again link it in the show notes. Anything else you just feel like you'd want to share with people about either your work or just inspirations?
I'm just grateful to have the opportunity to talk, and I don't know. I feel like everything's going to be okay one way or the other. Yeah. Change, just I think for me, like embracing change has been super helpful, but also realizing that we are also agents of change, and I think there's been a lot of disempowerment going on, and I think I just in myself, I want to make sure that I'm remembering to be empowered, and that like we all have a chance to shape the world that we want to create, and that we have a lot of that being able to surrender to spirit, God, whatever you want to call it, mystery, is also a partner in that. So yeah.
Amen to that.
Amen.
Rachel, thank you for joining us and for sharing your experiences and your wisdom. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Collective Voice, the premier podcast of the 787 Collective. For more information, visit us at 787collective.org or find us on social media. And if you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to subscribe, rate us, and share a review. For when you do, you are tricking the algorithm for the common good.